Joe Duffy, CEO of OffshoreInsiders.com. On this report, I'm going to teach you how to use power ratings and how I've effectively been able to integrate it into my winning handicapping at OffshoreInsiders.com. Now, I had a sharp about, a year and a half ago. He kind of gave me a rundown of which ones do well and which ones do not. And this is a guy that I've known since the 1980 score phone days. He is a very heavy hitter, a really high roller, and in the last several years, he really has gotten these power ratings down to a science and does that for about 90% of the handicapping. He's probably the most successful models better in the entire universe. And we've been trading information for several decades. And he showed me the spreadsheet that basically said there are some of the models, and these include ones that are available publicly for purchase by you, that do extremely well in certain sports, but they do not do well in other sports. And in fact, he told me in certain other sports, if anything, they're a fade. So I'm going to be honest with you. My gut reaction was I was initially underwhelmed. How can something be so good in one sport and so terrible in another sport? And it really took me a little while, and I smacked myself in the head, and I'm like, you know, what the heck? Joe Duffy, this is consistent with what you've been saying all along, that the truth is that some of these power ratings and models, they put a lot of emphasis in recent play, and then other ones put emphasis in long term. And I've been saying all along that professional sports, for the most part, are about regression to the mean, while college sports are a little bit more about momentum. Than I've even told you which sports are even more about momentum and even which sports are more about regression. And then I wound up looking at these results and I'm like, wait a minute, it is pretty obvious. The ones that do very well in college sports, for example, I'm going to give you one very specific example. Sportsline, pretty good in college basketball. And you know why? Because the Sportsline one puts a ton of emphasis in recent play and momentum. And that is why they are so much better in college sports. Where conversely, I'll flat out tell you, when it comes to, say, NBA totals, all of a sudden, Sportsline, if anything, is a big fade. Why? Because they put too much emphasis in recent play. So you really have to know the strengths and weaknesses of each one. For example, Accuscore is one that does a better job or a worse job, depending on which way you want to look at it, from each sport, as far as putting emphasis really on kind of the full year to date, where Sportsline really puts so much more emphasis on momentum, and Accuscore is an example of one that puts a little bit more focus on the full year to date. So most of the power ratings that we have studied, one of the reasons why they're actually pretty good fades is because they put too much heavy emphasis on momentum, which again in college basketball is pretty good, and that's why some of these do better in college basketball. But it spits in the face of overvalued and regression to the mean, some of the very basic metrics that have made me better than 98% of the handicappers out there. You hear the old adage, you don't want to handicap the teams, you want to handicap the numbers, and that's what we've done because we do know about the regression to the mean. So frankly, I do think, like I said, a lot of these programs a little bit too heavy with a bias on going with the hotter team and fading the colder team. So once you figure out that one size does not fit all, that's when you're ready to win. You got to know the intrinsic biases of each that makes them great in some sports and horrible in others. And like I already mentioned to you, for example, a good example is CBS Sportsline is a big fade in NBA totals because it's built so much momentum, offensive and defensive momentum. Sportsline basically says, look, if a team is red hot offensively and ice cold defensively, keep betting the over. And that's not really how gambling works when it comes to regression to the mean. In fact, teams make adjustments, and that's why it was actually a pretty good fade when it comes to that particular realm. Now, a lot of people ask about KenPom. KenPom is the best for predicting the odds in college basketball, but predicting the odds is not the same as predicting who is going to cover against them, and you really need to know the difference. So when I do my handicapping, and I like to look a couple days in advance, even if there aren't any official odds or posted, KenPom is great for that, but again, predicting the odds and predicting the spread outcome are a little bit different. All in all, at the end of the day, my other metrics are what really separates me from the rest of the gambling world. I would say that the computer models figure into a little bit less than 10% of my handicapping and more for corroboration if I got something that's really on the bubble. And then some of the better models and the way that I weigh each and every solitary one, that can kind of put me a little bit over the top. Or if it's, you know, I'm kind of on the bubble, it can also talk me off of it. So at the end of the day, I do think that these computer models and power ratings are better for corroboration than just about anything else. Now remember, please like my videos, please spread the word, subscribe, feel free to ask any questions. We're on a bunch of different media, but please subscribe to us wherever you can and spread the word. And most importantly, before placing a bet, always visit offshoreinsiders.com.